Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Becoming a Powerhouse Brand. Today I have got the lovely Lauren Smy coming on, and Lauren and I go way back in that we were both in the wedding industry together, and Lauren has had a really amazing journey with pivots and shifts and changes, and she's completely transitioned what she does or what she did do into what she does now into being an ADHD performance coach. So Lauren helps high achieving women with ADHD to break free from overwhelm, from self-criticism and perfectionism. I know a lot of you listening to this or watching this on YouTube will be saying and holding your hands up, yes, I'm a perfectionist, because it is one of the traits that so many of us have as entrepreneurs. We want to deliver to the highest standard. We want to have an amazing business. We want everything to be perfect. And actually, a lot of the time, that's just not reality. Like, I think if you can actually step away from that whole trying to make everything perfect to the point where you don't do anything because it's not perfect, it can really hold you back in your business. So, welcome, Lauren, to the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yay. Could you just tell us, for everyone watching or listening to this, what your journey has been? Because obviously we started way back. I can't even remember how many years ago it was. It must have been about, I don't know,
About
eight.
2017, maybe
Yeah, yeah,
2018. Yeah, it was, yeah, right at the very beginning when I just kind of so I was making wedding cakes when we first met. We did a styled shoot together, didn't
yes.
we? Um, and that was my very first styled shoot. I hadn't really done many wedding cakes at that point. I'd been making cakes, but I really was kind of transitioning into weddings. So yeah, that was 2017 was when I went fully self-employed. For Before that, I was a teacher, and for a couple of years, I did that transition of part-time teaching, part-time doing the cakes. And once that took over, that's when I went fully into making cakes.
Amazing. That's
So
just,
yeah,
it feels like it's such a long time ago now, doesn't
I
it?
know. Yeah, well, it's so much happened in between, isn't it? I think with COVID, especially for those of us that were in the wedding industry in
Yeah.
2020, that was a particularly difficult time. But that was part of what was involved in my transitioning over from being a cake maker to being a coach, which kind of had a few steps on the way. Um, so I mean, prior to making cakes, I did a few different jobs. I worked in banking. I was a teacher, and then when I just after I'd had my babies, I've got twins. They're 11 now, and that goes quick. But after I had them, I started up my own business making cakes alongside teaching. Did that, turned that into a full-time job, ended up, really doing really well with that, making cakes at the Dorchester and the Ned and, places like that with preferred supplier. But then obviously the COVID years hit and things shut down in the wedding industry. Luckily, just before that, I'd actually started to start building another business, which was mentoring other cake makers. And with the time, in hindsight, it was quite good. With the time that COVID gave me from not having any weddings, meant I was able to really ramp up that business. And then I started, mentoring other cake makers, and I did courses on helping them get into kind of making wedding cakes. I did a membership for them. Um, and I was doing that alongside making the wedding cakes. And then a couple of years ago, while I was kind of doing both of those businesses at the same time, I found out that I had ADHD. That came about because my son got diagnosed first of all, and I think there's a lot of us kind of, in 30s and 40s with children that get diagnosed first, discovering there's that genetic link, and then I kind of went, oh, okay, that fits a lot of what, the experience that I kind of recognize within myself. Um, so the ADHD kind of became part of me. While I was kind of going through that understanding, I signed up and did a coaching qualification, like an ICF accredited, because I was calling myself a coach, but I wasn't really a coach. I was very much like a mentor, and that's fine. But I really wanted to learn more about like how coaching can really kind of help people and how to do that properly. Because
Yeah.
you mentioned about like being a perfectionist, but I am that kind of, I want to learn how to do it properly. I'm not just
Yeah.
going to go out there and call myself a coach. Um, yeah, and I did that, and at the same time, I was having ADHD coaching myself, and it just I didn't know where I was going to go with that coaching qualification, but having been on the receiving end of ADHD coaching, it just was so transformative. And I know it sounds so cliche, but it really was like really powerful and helped me so, so much. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want
Yeah.
to do with other people, because there's so many people in this position that I was in, especially as entrepreneurs, running your own business. It kind of it can be difficult to fit in the corporate world. We often kind of come out of it and to do our own thing. But a lot of and it's mostly women, not exclusively, but mostly women that I work with have those feelings of I'm not quite achieving what I want to or I should be able to achieve. And often it's things with their ADHD that's holding them back.
Yeah.
Now I've kind of, gone. I don't know if it's full circle. It's certainly not linear, but the progression is that's where I've ended up.
Yeah. So what did you notice once you got that diagnosis? Like how did it change things for you in your business, in like creating a strategy, and even in your personal life? Like what was that sort of big shift for you from just getting that diagnosis?
There was a couple of things I think, and actually there's kind of three things that I learned about myself that I really put into my coaching that kind of underpin it. And the first one is understanding. So just kind of a bit of psychoeducation, understanding what ADHD is, how it affects your brain, what that means, and then the understanding of how ADHD affects you personally, because everyone with ADHD isn't the same. We don't all have exactly the same challenges or exactly the same strengths. So kind of understanding what ADHD is, what it means, bit of the kind of neuroscience geeking out on that. Um, and how it affected me. What, that real, like, just that awareness, that
Yeah.
self-awareness. Um, and the awareness with the lens of ADHD, because I think most of us, I think in this, a lot of us are kind of quite self-aware and we can see what we're doing. But with that lens of, oh, the ADHD, it kind of just makes a lot more sense with stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. So I think we sort of start with the self-awareness and then the self-acceptance, which is, I think, a really tricky one. And it's still something that I'm working on. Like, honestly, it's not something I think is ever going to be a kind of, done and dusted. Same with the awareness as well. But actually kind of accepting that this is how things are. This is, what I've got. I have got ADHD. This is how it affects me. And not seeing that as a kind of uh, resigning yourself to the situation or like your limitations, but just acknowledging what's going on and how it, what your current reality is, using that awareness to be able to actually move forward. So
Yeah.
seeing like that self-acceptance, that's something that has kind of really been powerful for me, kind of seeing it as like a launch pad for progress rather than, oh, okay, I've got ADHD, so I can't do it, or I've got ADHD, so, I'm never going to be able to do this. It's right, I've got ADHD that makes some of these things hard. So how do I need to do it differently?
Yeah.
And that's been really, really important for me. And then kind of tied in with those two, then is my kind of third thing that I've developed, and that's not, but in terms of my model is self-compassion. Because we have probably, most of us, I don't any of people listening and watching, if you're kind of in that similar position in your 30s 40s and suddenly maybe realizing that you might have ADHD, you've probably gone through your life beating yourself up.
Yeah.
There is a statistic, they say by the age of 12, children with ADHD have received 20,000 more negative messages
Really?
than the average sort of neurotypical child. And that's not always intentional. That's always like, it's not always with, malintent. Sometimes it's just parents and I've found myself doing it with, I have had to really notice myself doing it. Like, oh, if you just applied yourself a bit more, those like classic school
Yeah.
reports, things like that. But, just try a bit harder. And it always makes you feel like you're not quite enough.
Yeah.
And so I think when you go through your life feeling that you're not quite enough and no matter what you do, there's no point, it doesn't work, or beating yourself up for being lazy, having those kind of labels, to go off on a tangent. I know people talk about, oh, why do you need a label of ADHD? But when you have a label of lazy or, daydreamer or any of those kind of things, they're not helpful.
Yeah.
When you kind of pin that down to, well, it's because of my ADHD. I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm not saying, oh, well, so everyone has to put up with me always being late,
Yeah.
but it is, I find this hard. I do find this hard, and I'm really trying hard,
Yeah.
and I'm making progress. My progress might be a bit slower than, if I didn't have ADHD, but if I kind of really fully accept it and am kind to myself, I'm going to make so much more progress than if I stay stuck in this, I don't want it to be like this. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Um, then you can't move forward with it, can you? So when you kind of fully accept that, that's when you can move forward.
Yeah. And is it true? Because I see a lot of entrepreneurs. I feel like there are more and more people saying how they've been diagnosed with ADHD. I would say in the last 2 years, especially, there's been a real rise in it. And it might just be that the people I'm connected to are a similar age. And like you said, a lot of the diagnosis comes out when you're in your 30s, 40s, and like you said, when your children maybe have been diagnosed. But is it kind of a trait that kind of comes hand in hand with being an entrepreneur, with like not fitting into the sort of typical 9 to 5 and wanting to be not necessarily sporadic, but just going and creating your own path? Would you say there's
Yeah.
kind of a real link between that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've tried to look, there are different statistics, different kind of, but yeah, I think there's certainly like a larger proportion of the population with ADHD do work for themselves rather than in self-employment. Sometimes that's through necessity. There are some people with ADHD that just cannot kind of work in that really kind of highly structured
Yeah,
environment. I mean, it's like I said earlier, not everyone with ADHD is the same. Some people with ADHD do thrive in very structured environments. You get a lot of people with ADHD in like the emergency services, because they've got a lot of those kind of strengths of being able to kind of react in the moment, that kind of
yeah,
thing. Teachers, with that structure, sometimes that works really well for your brain. But ADHD brains do tend to get bored quite easily. The dopamine dysregulation means that kind of just doing the same thing each day can just, not be very fulfilling. So they're going to seek novelty. So by working for yourself, you kind of have that bit more control over how you structure your day, and doing things that you find really interesting and fire you up. And you're going to be more successful, like everyone, ADHD or not, you're going to be more successful doing something that you enjoy. But certainly with ADHD, your brain works much better when you're engaged in something that you find interesting. So yeah, it's definitely a big trait in entrepreneurship.
it's crazy, isn't it? But yeah, there are a lot more people, and it's funny because you can almost feel it in their energy, their shift, and their messaging, and everything changes because they've almost had this awakening into, okay, this is me. Like this explains so much of how I do things, or things that really affect me or impact me, or things I find more challenging, and it just helps them to adapt their business and maybe even their offers to fit in with things that actually are in alignment with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that came about for me when I was doing with the cake mentoring. I was doing a lot of live launching for my programs. So that kind of involved a huge amount of executive functioning, they call it, like with all the planning and organizing everything, and then a lot of energy when you might not have that energy. I mean, that's something that I've learned about myself, is trying to work with my energy rather
Yeah,
than force my energy to fit a kind of situation. So I did realize, I successfully launched my programs and my membership, but it took a lot out of me. And I kind of realized I didn't really like doing it like that. So on the final two kind of launches were much softer launches. And I found it quite hard at first because I'm like, well, this is the way you should do it, and this is the way
yeah,
that's. But actually, I thought, but I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't make me feel good. Like once I've got through it all, I'm fine. But I was kind of going through these burnout cycles, and knowing that I'm already kind of susceptible to that anyway, like I realized, why would I keep putting myself through that? So yeah, so definitely, yeah, you say there's that shift and working out what works best for you. I did mine much more on like a wait list, and then kind of soft, talking to people. And then I just kind of launched it as an evergreen product rather than it being having to be, that, and so then that could just roll.
yeah.
And that suited my way of working much better.
I love that. And I love that you created your own strategy that actually felt good. And this is something that I talk about a lot on the podcast, is about that energetic alignment. And energy isn't all about like jumping around and being high vibe all the time. It's about being at your frequency that feels good to you and working your business around things that light you up and make you feel good. So, like you said, live launching isn't for everybody. And I think there is a lot of hype around this is how you should launch, or if you want to make a lot of money, or if you want to have a successful launch, this is how you should do it. But when you start putting shoulds in,
Mm.
especially if it goes against what feels good to you and what goes, like if you do have ADHD, or even if you don't, but you just find certain things really challenging. And when I say challenging, I'm not talking about like growing your confidence, because you do need to push yourself out of your comfort zone, don't you, to grow. But there's a difference between there being a resistance in that it just isn't aligned to you and sort of growing your confidence. So to be able to launch things in a way that feels good for you, knowing that you have ADHD, like that is amazing. And I know a lot of people listening to this will just suddenly realize, okay, you don't have to do it this way. And that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and not only for yourself, but I think, I know you speak about this, but that kind of authenticity of living and working in a way that kind of aligns with your values and
Yeah.
with the way that you work best will come across to your clients and potential clients, and then you're going to build much stronger connections with people. I've had people, from the cake world come to work with me in terms of ADHD. At first, when I found out I had ADHD, I was a bit reluctant to tell everybody in the cake, like in the membership and all of that kind of thing, because I did think, oh, what are they going to think then? Like I can't manage things very well because I've got ADHD. That stuff comes into your head, doesn't it? The mindset wobbles. But I thought, well, if that is what they think, then they're not people that I kind of want to work with. And so far, like they've seen that I've managed before I knew I had
Yeah.
ADHD. So I was really honest and open about it. And if anyone had any questions about it, I brought that up, and that actually kind of really, really brought people kind of more into my world, I think, because they could see that I was, yes, it's that sort of living your true self and
Yeah.
giving them permission to do the same.
Yeah, and it's then more relatable, isn't it? Because people can then see, okay, there are other people that are creating success like me. Like it's not something that's going to hold you back. It's just doing things differently.
Yeah.
What is that first step? If you think like you have some traits, because I know you share on like LinkedIn and stuff, some of the traits that can come up if you have ADHD. If you don't already follow Lauren on LinkedIn or any social media channels, make sure you check her out. The links are all in the show notes below. Um, but you're always sharing these posts, and I'm like, yeah, I have all of those things. Okay, okay, okay. What would be that next step for somebody that thinks, okay, this might actually be me? How do you actually get tested? Like, what is that next step for going through?
Okay. So there's a couple of different kind of pathways. You can go, the quickest way is to go privately. You would still probably you'd have to kind of check, but at different places will need different things. You probably still need like a GP referral. So almost always the first step is going to be going to the GP. And then you can either ask for a private referral or to be referred through the NHS. The private referral will always be quicker, just because that's the way it is. The downsides, obviously, it costs money, and that can range from about 500 up to over £1,000, depending where it is. The thing to be really aware of with a private diagnosis is that if you would like medication, they can prescribe that, but you'll pay a private prescription for that, which can be a couple of £100s a month. So I just always say to people to be aware of that, because and it's very, very difficult to just get that handed over your GP to do the shared care. So a lot of people find themselves with this diagnosis and right, okay, I really feel like medication would help me, but then it's prohibitively expensive, or they have to go back to the start of the queue for the NHS. But if you just want to find out, then that's probably like the quickest, easiest way.
Yeah.
Going through the NHS, there is an option, and I don't know if you put it in the show notes, I can give you the kind of link to look at, in terms of looking at right to choose. This isn't just ADHD, this is anything on the NHS, but it's particularly useful because the waiting times are so long. Some places are kind of 10 years. I mean, it's at least a
Oh,
couple of years
wow.
wherever you go, in whatever part of the country. And it's a bit of a lottery as to where you live. But to kind of, because they've acknowledged that those queues are so long, there is an option where the NHS outsources it to a private company, but it still counts as an NHS direct assessment. So if you go to your GP and ask them to refer you through the right to choose pathway, you can be seen a bit quicker, but then that still gets you under the NHS for medication. So something to look at.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of when you go to the GP, it's really important to and it's very difficult to do sometimes, but to be aware that not all GPs have got the same kind of level of awareness and understanding. I've heard some horrible stories of people of GPs that can be very dismissive, and most women are, and again, I don't know what the statistics are, but there's a huge number of us that are misdiagnosed or maybe diagnosed, but the ADHD is also misdiagnosed with ADHD, with anxiety, depression, things like that. Perimenopause is another thing that
Yeah.
can exacerbate, but it might be just, oh, it's just your hormones, where it probably is your hormones, but it could also be ADHD. So that can be missed. So be kind of ready with some examples of how you feel that ADHD, how, like, why you think you might have ADHD, what things are affecting you. Um, and it needs to be more than just like, oh, sometimes I'm a bit forgetful, because everybody, like, and this is the thing, isn't it? There's some of that stuff over social media that, oh, everyone thinks they've got ADHD or
Yeah.
everyone is a bit ADHD. It's by definition, it needs to be an impairment. So it needs to be something that negatively affects your life on a regular basis and since childhood.
Yeah.
So if you've just started getting the symptoms in your 40s, it might just be perimenopause. There has to be some evidence of it having happened kind of prior to age 12. But yeah, any sort of evidence that you can bring with you just to kind of strengthen your case, because to stop them, blocking you at the first hurdle, so that you can get that first referral. And then you'll have a kind of really in-depth assessment. You have to fill in forms, and then a couple of hours interview kind of discussion about all of those things. So, but getting over that first hurdle is helpful if you've got some examples of things.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I'll put that link in the show notes as well so that people can go and find out about their next steps. And then for people that have been recently diagnosed, if they are somebody, obviously, because you've got different options, haven't you? You have got medication that you can take. If there is somebody listening to this that's like, I don't want to take medication, how could I adapt my business to fit like this new awareness of myself? Is it like, because you obviously had a pivot, didn't you? Do you find that a lot of people, particularly entrepreneurs, when they've had this diagnosis, they do kind of take that step back and shift their entire business model? Or what is that kind of next step to help them get into alignment?
Sometimes it's not always necessary to be like a complete pivot. Sometimes there will be, when I think about my clients, some of them have literally kind of left their corporate job and started up their own business. So they've done a huge change. Sometimes those shifts only need to be quite small, and it is,
Yeah.
like the way that you do things. But in terms of what you do about it, it unfortunately there's not any real kind of support, particularly from the NHS. It is something that you would have to kind of arrange yourself. Um, but yeah, it working. I know this sounds, because this is what I do, but working with a coach or just working with someone, another mentor, but someone who understands ADHD is really, really important. Because I know this from personal experience, and again from some of my clients, when you work with a business coach for how to do things better and they don't understand ADHD, it can either like not be very helpful or actually be worse,
Yeah.
because it leaves you feeling like there's a frustration on both sides. The coach is like, well, I keep telling her to do this and she just doesn't do it. Why didn't she do it? And you're thinking, oh, no, I should do this and I don't. Whereas having someone who is a bit more kind of empathetic and compassionate about that side of things, but also can help you understand what's going on,
Yeah.
is really key. I know I kind of, so I worked with a coach last year for about 6 months, and I started working with her again. And there was again this kind of part of me that thought, oh, well, if I need a coach, how can I coach other people to do things? But actually it's not because you don't know the things, it's just having that kind of support kind of
Yeah.
alongside the accountability. And yeah, just kind of sometimes that is what you need.
Yeah, 100%. And I think everybody needs that, don't they? Like all of those successful like leaders in their field, they all have a coach or a
Yeah.
mentor. Like everybody, all the way up to the top people that you can think about. because it is that accountability, it's that support, it's having that soundboard, because you can have a thriving business and be known as an absolute leader in your field, but still to keep going, you have to be shifting all the time. We live in such a crazy world right now where the online space changes on what feels like a monthly basis. So you need to be adapting to things. And obviously, if you have ADHD, um, then you are perhaps going to have to do a little bit more work or just think of things differently or take different action in order to flow with how the online space is changing in itself.
Yeah, yeah. And that person having that outside perspective, because you're so kind of in your own head, aren't you? And someone who's just got that little step back that can go, and and a good coach won't necessarily tell you what to do, but will kind of say, well, what's what's the reason, why are you working like this?
Yeah.
What else could work for you? What else has worked in the past? Those sorts of questions that can dig deep, then you kind of go, actually, yeah, maybe, and it just gets you thinking from a different perspective, which is it's really quite hard to do by yourself.
Yeah, 100%. So how do you support your clients when they work with you?
Um, I work very, it's very much on a individual basis. Everybody has their different things that they bring. I work one to one mostly. I do some group courses as well. A lot of the group courses are more kind of around the understanding the psychoeducation side of things. When you work one to one, you can obviously get much deeper into what's going on. And yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question to answer because I work with everyone in a different way. But it's generally about kind of following those three things that I mentioned, like what's going on. But I always start with quite an in-depth kind of questionnaire, which is almost a mini coaching session itself that kind of asks, what are you finding difficult? What are your strengths? Because I really like to kind of go with a strengths-based approach, because we have too many, like I said, all those messages of trying to fix ourselves, but let's actually look at what we're good at as well. So what are we going to kind of really harness to help you move forward? What are the things that you're struggling with? How do you want things to be different? And then you can come in with some of the key things that they kind of want to work on. And then it's kind of very much down to them. Sometimes it will be that they'll come with a thing that's happened that week and they realize that this happens all the time. I'm always late in the morning. I'm always getting really frustrated with my kids, like on the morning school run, and I don't know how to do it differently. So then we just kind of break it down, because it feels like such a big thing and it's all the
Yeah.
time. And we break it down. What's actually happening? Like what's leading up to that? What could you do differently? And there's never a kind of like do this and it will work. Sometimes I will make suggestions, because sometimes you can be so kind of overwhelmed that you don't even know where to start. And I say, well, what about this? How does that feel? Yeah, and we just kind of work through those particular things. And sometimes it's longer term things. It is about like, I want to leave my job and set up my own business. I mean, again, that comes down to breaking it down. It's like, we'll look at your values and your goals and your strengths, and how we want to kind of utilize all of those things, and then just break it down step by step. And I kind of do it alongside them, with them.
Love that. I love that. And I think like particularly with this kind of thing, that one-to-one support, it's the
Yeah.
same when I work one-to-one. Well, anybody that works one-to-one, when you work with somebody on that level, you just get so much deeper into supporting that person. And obviously they get a much better transformation because they've got your full attention as well. And I think people can tend to open up a bit more, can't they? Especially if there are some resistances there. You don't always want to open up fully if you are in a group program. But that is amazing that you are able to support people kind of no matter what life stage they're at the moment in understanding their ADHD and how they can shift things in their everyday life and in their business in order to get the results that they want. Um, so I will put the links in the show notes below for getting access to you to find out more about working with you. And you've got a free guide, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a guide to overwhelm, and I've also just got like a guide to coaching of what that involves. So if you're kind of thinking whether you want coaching, or what how ADHD is different, ADHD coaching is different from normal coaching, then I've got that as well. So I've got a couple of things.
Amazing. Make sure you go and grab those guides if this has really helped you today. If you feel like you might want to go down that route of getting tested, or if you're already going through the process, or even if this has just helped you to realize that there's not one way to do business. There's not one way to grow a brand. You can choose how you do things and how you show up and how you grow your business yourself. It doesn't have to be done the set or the one cookie cutter way. So thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on today. It's been really helpful. Hopefully it's been really eye-opening for you. If you had enjoyed this episode, please do reach out to Lauren and myself, leave a review and put any comments below as well, and we will reach out to you. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.